Hey everybody, this is Chris Mahan. Welcome back to another Lead Your Teen special podcast. This is episode 3 of Shadows on the Wall, the psychology of a school shooter. If you've been following along the last couple of weeks, you know we've had some issues with hurricanes and different things like that. And we got another hurricane coming down here in Florida on Wednesday. However, I have a very special guest, as I was telling you all this week. Nona Giddens is a therapist in Atlanta, and she and I met a few weeks ago up in Atlanta at the Empower Success Fest. And we've been chatting for about a week or two about different things. And I said, hey, you really got to come on the show. So, welcome, Nona. How are you?
I'm doing well, Chris. How are you? Thanks for having
Absolutely
me.
fantastic.
Good. Thank
So
you.
I would like to go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit, tell people what you do, what your specialty is, and um, the types of clients that you have.
Okay. I am a licensed professional counselor here in the state of Georgia. I am also a master life coach. I work with clients generally ranging from the age of about 12 to 13 on up into young adulthood, middle adulthood, and older adulthood. I have worked with clients much younger than that, children. I think the youngest that I've worked with was about the age of 5.
Wow.
Yeah. And generally, with regards to the children, I'm working with children that have anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, anger issues, several different kind of clinically diagnosed challenges that they and their parents are struggling with. I have done a lot of community service work,
Hmm.
community mental health. And what that is I have gone into the homes specifically to work with children as well as other members of the family. With community mental health, we also go into the schools. Many schools here in the state of Georgia allow mental health therapists, community workers to come into the school and to work with children that have academic as well as behavioral challenges. For the schools that do allow community mental health professionals to come in, they've seen a significant improvement, I should say, in children's behaviors across the line. They've also, because the children are receiving counseling and therapy for the different challenges that they have, excuse me, for the different challenges that they have, they've also seen improvements in their academics as well. Because when children have challenges behaviorally in the classroom, that does impede their academic performance. So, coupled with being in the school as well as going into the home, we've seen a lot of improvement with children's academically and also with their behaviors.
That's awesome. That's really nice. Yeah, I did a podcast on the show, the first one. I was talking about some of the things that the kids are going through, and the lack of sleep was one of the big issues that when kids are in a challenged home and they've got a lot of things going on, usually sleep is one of those things outside of maybe food, but sleep is a big problem, the lack of sleep. And that can cause irritability and poor performance in the classroom and different things like that. And also, we talked the other day, we were doing a little pre-production call the other day, folks, and we were talking about these, the digital age is all about the phones and tablets and how that can also contribute to a lot of the issues that we're going to be talking about in the next hour. So, as we talked the other day, we did a production meeting the other day because I always want to make sure that we are on the same page and how things are going. And we came up with a couple things that I'd already talked about, but I was glad to hear it. I was telling Nona that um, I am not a therapist, so I am a life coach, and I've been working with young people. I'm an advocate, and but I study this every day, and so a lot of the things that I've been telling everybody fell right in line with what she was saying. So I was really glad to hear that. But as we were talking, we were coming up with how do we verbalize to a parent that is having issues without sounding derogatory, judgmental, finger pointing. I said in my book, because I've been saying it for years, I use the term dysfunctional. And you made a very good point yesterday in our production meeting that that can come off as a very judgmental or condescending term. And so
Intimidating.
go into, if you could, let people know if they're seeing someone, especially if it's a family. Let me set the stage here. Since 2008, the family dynamic has changed. When the crash happened 2008, 2009, a lot of families moved back in with their parents or vice versa. So now you have generational uh, ages, different generations in one home. You might have the grandparents, they might be living with a son or daughter and his family, her family, and then their children. So you have all these ages in one home with different ideas, different values, different societal norms now. Things aren't the same as they were back in the 50s and 60s or 70s. Things are much different. And that can cause a lot of, dare I say, stress in the home because of just different ideas of how to parent or how to do different things.
Mhm.
If that's the case for a child and they're maybe getting lost in the mix, how do you approach that family without sounding like you're judging them or um, demeaning them in any way, but you want to get your point across that they have to change their behavior? How would you do that?
Generally speaking, the first line of assistance, if you will, that the family is going to encounter will typically be the school. Oftentimes, that's where behaviors get on the radar. And initially, a teacher or a school counselor may reach out to a parent with regards to the child's behavior in the classroom, in the school, on the playground, different things like that. And so from that perspective, it's really important how the teachers, the paraprofessionals that's working with the children, the school counselors, how they initially open that conversation with the parents and with the family is going to be really important. And like you said, verbiage and language terminology is very important. And so it's really important that we don't use a lot of clinical terminology, a lot of technical terminology. It's very important to just use layman terms when talking to parents and just express what has been observed. And I think you and I talked yesterday, and one of the things I said teachers generally lead with is what kind of changes may have taken place in a family. Has anything happened? That kind of thing. And so when we start to engage with those kind of questions, we want to be very careful, as you said, not to have a condescending tone or an accusatory tone. It's going to be important that we're just communicating with their parents, letting them know the concern, you know, um, that the teacher, the principal, all the school administrators have for their child or children. So just gently talking, expressing concern, asking questions, trying to determine whether or not there have been any changes recently with regards to that child. Because one thing we want to remember is that number one, behaviors are communication.
Mm-hmm.
Behaviors represent communication. Oftentimes, children don't have the verbiage or the language to adequately express what's going on, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what they're experiencing. So oftentimes that communication is going to show up in the form of behaviors.
Right.
And so we need to recognize that, communicating that, with the family. And again, try not to have a condescending or judgmental or critical tone. Another thing we talked about yesterday was that oftentimes parents are doing the best that they can with what they have, whatever that may look like. They're doing their best. And so that needs to be acknowledged as well and understood. Parents are working with what they're working with. And so we want to be mindful of that. We want to be understanding of that. So these are some of the things that we just generally need to be careful of. In Georgia, for the schools that do allow mental health clinicians to come in, they have a list of resources to different agencies um, that 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 have therapists on staff, and those therapists are ready when there's a phone call made inquiring. They're ready to get on board and go to the home, speak to the parents, go to the school to find out, generally what's going on with that student and that child.
That's what we have here in Florida. That's great. They have it up there. Here in Florida, we do have through Baycare, we have a mental health, a youth mental health bus that the therapist will go to the home. They also teach youth mental health the classes.
Mhm,
I took mine a couple of years ago. I'm due for a re-up. It's good for a couple of years.
mhm.
And I really think that in today's world, now that we think about it and talking about it, I think that parents, when their kids maybe hit fifth grade before they go into sixth grade, junior high, maybe they should take that class to see the warning signs and see what's happening with their son or daughter. And I think if it's a mandatory thing for the parent to prepare for their child to go into middle school, it wouldn't seem like they're being singled out because everybody has to do it, right? So I
Right.
think that might be something I might present that this year and see if that's something that can be done because it's all free. And
Mhm.
I've been trying with this, this is called Shadows on the Wall, the psychology of a school shooter. And it's kind of a rough name, but as we talked yesterday, I'm trying to help parents get to the root cause of these issues so that they don't have a problem when their son is 15, 16, 17, or 14, as we saw in Georgia, and 14, 15 we saw in Michigan a couple of years ago, and just the list goes down the line of ages, the varying ages, but typically it's about 15, 16 years old. So as you just said, if there's some issues in the home at 8, 9, 10, by the time that child is now 15, 16, they've had 8 years of these challenges, and they've probably compounded over time. Maybe, because I want to try and come up with some solutions to offer to schools, and that, would you think it'd be a decent idea or a good idea to present something like, hey, go to the school and actually have them teach these classes to parents so they know what to look for? Because as you just said, they're doing the best they can. And if they don't know, they don't know, right?
Absolutely.
And if that's how they were brought up, uh, then they do what they know. Or if they're now a single parent, or they're a parent they're really just struggling with just survival, their kids can kind of be put on the wayside. I know it sounds terrible, but it's just about survival mode. Perhaps if we did offer some sort of training, mental health training, they would know what to look for and they could be on board. So when they are told by teachers or other professionals, it wouldn't seem so like, what did you do wrong? It's, hey,
Absolutely.
they could have that same conversation in layman's terms.
Mhm.
That might be something that I can present because that's done here in Florida through Baycare. Uh, it's a fabulous organization. Baycare is one of the largest hospitals here. They have a great mental health arm of that hospital.
Mhm.
So I might present that down here in Florida. Um, you also mentioned communication. I've tell people for years that I believe that poor communication is the root of all conflict. And as a former mediator in the courts down here and different things I read about in my book, the words that we use to our give, I'm just back this up. The words that we as parents use when we are upset or we think that our kids can understand on the same level, the same cognitive level, mental level, understanding level, I think that's where they shut down. When parents just assume because they understand what went wrong or what's happening, they assume that their child does as well. Because, 14, 15 years old, they're out playing video games, doing their thing. But what parents don't realize, and we're finally talking about it more today, is the actual brain development of a young person isn't there until they're saying 24. But as we talked about yesterday, I think with all the things that are happening in today's world, I don't feel like the male brain, maybe the female brain, but the male brain to me, I think, is a little bit behind where it was even 15, 20 years ago. So if you've got a 15-year-old, you think, okay, he's 15. Mentally, he may be only 12. Okay. And, but we see them as 15. We have expectations of them as 15, society and as a family, but their cognitive, their mental capacity may be several years behind. How do you address that with a parent if they're thinking, if their expectations are here for their 15, 16-year-old, but their child is down here emotionally? How do you bridge that gap with the parent?
That's a really good question, Chris. Another thing, before I answer that, I want to also say first that so we know that there's a chronological difference in cognitive and mental development between males and females. The science says females develop a little bit quicker than males do.
Hmm.
Um, but something else that's going to impact that development, that can very easily impact that development, are things that's going on in the family, things that's going on in the home, things going on in society. So if a child has experienced some kind of trauma, some kind of challenging life experience, the science also tells us that it's very possible for a child to get stuck at whatever age they experience that challenge or that
Hmm.
trauma. They can become mentally stuck at that age. So let's say a child experiences something around the age 6 or 8. The body continues to grow and develop, but mentally, the brain physically continues to grow and develop, but mentally and cognitively, we may see a child get fixated at a certain age, emotionally
Hmm.
and mentally. So when we look at that, and when we couple that with just regular brain development, and then if the child has experienced something within the family, or natural disaster, you guys are dealing with hurricanes down
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Second
So
one in a week. It's gonna be here Wednesday. There's just so much
right, right.
emotional stress down here right now. It's, well, actually all the way through Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's really strong, really, really hard right now.
Right. And kids can seriously be impacted by that. So when working with parents, that is one of the things that is going to be really crucial. So the way we do um, community mental health here in Georgia is we not only see the children, but we also see the parents, and we provide the parents with what's called psychoeducation. And
Okay.
that's basically educating the parents about the things that are impacting their children. We talk about how trauma impacts. We talk about how a child can get stuck mentally or emotionally in a situation. And so, in addition to just educating the parents about how their children are being impacted by their experiences, then we also teach them. We do parent training with them. We teach them about different parent skills to respond more effectively to their children's challenges. So it's not just all about working with the child, but we have to work with the entire family unit oftentimes. I've worked with children where I had to work with their siblings, older
Hmm.
siblings or
Yep.
younger siblings. I had to work with the mother and the father. If there were other generational family members in the home, a grandmother or a great grandmother, or a grandfather, we would extend that parent training to everybody. We would extend the family training also to those siblings as well.
How do
So
you? I'm sorry. This I've just got me going here. I do the same thing in my coaching, and I've had a lot of pushback sometimes from parents because they tell me, "Hey, my kid's doing this. Fix them. Fix my kid." And so they put all the responsibility of the corrective behavior and all these things on the child, regardless of whatever age. I've dealt with 22, 24 down to 14.
mhm,
And I tell them, your child's not broken, so we can't fix your kid. He's not a machine. Okay, there's just more to that.
Right.
But I tell them too that this has to be this is a family issue. I sometimes get a lot of pushback from that, especially from dads. Actually, I've gotten from moms too sometimes. How then, if you know that you're going to help them and you want the whole family dynamic to accept these changes and accept what's happening, and you get that pushback, how do you address that?
Generally, the conversation starts with the first intake when you first meet the family. And I may meet with the parents 2 or 3 times before I even start working with the children. And in those 2 or 3 meetings, I'm just really talking to the parent, developing a rapport with the parents, letting them know that this is assistance, this is not a situation where they're being blamed, where the approach is you're at fault. And like you said, we're not here to fix the children, but not the parents aren't broken either.
Right,
We're
right.
here to assist them with developing skills to respond to their child or children in a more effective manner. And so initially, those 2 or 3 sessions are very important where there's a lot of dialogue, there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of history taking, and in this process, trying to show parents how there's a cause and effect, not a blame. There's something different. And the other thing that seems to be really effective is when I'm talking to the parents and when they're telling me how they're responding to the children. One of the main questions I asked is, how is that working? Are you seeing positive changes based on you did what your mother or your father did? 99.9% of the times, the response is going to be no. And that starts another level of discussion. And so I asked, well, if that's not working, would you be willing to try something different? And I'll give a period of time. Let's try this for a certain period of time. And if you don't find that it's effective, then we'll move and we'll try something different. So again, that whole idea of educating the parent, letting the parent know that your presence is one of support, not condemnation or criticism. So that's pretty much the strategy. We got to first get in the home, establish that rapport, educate the family on certain things, and once they see how, well, she's right. If what I'm doing is not working, then maybe I need to try something else, because while I responded in a positive way to how my parents did, for some reason my child isn't. And when we can help the parents to see that, not from an accusatory place, but just from an observational place, more than likely they'll come on board and they'll be ready to work with the therapist if that's the approach that's used.
Yeah, that's great. And like I said, I've had both sides. Some parents are just really involved and they're great. And I give homework once in a while, like
Mhm.
communication homework, different
Absolutely.
things, and they're all
Absolutely.
into it. And
Yes.
they do the group activities, the play acting things back and forth to say, well, I'll do a staged argument, and I'll ask them. I actually wrote it in my book. What was your last argument on? Like, what was it? And did
Mhm.
you solve it, or did you just kind of bury it until the next time it arises its ugly head? You continue this, or what did you do? So, I'll have them actually do that scenario
Mhm.
and say, okay, you saying this, how did this make you feel? You saying that, how did this make you feel? And do you see how your words and your emotions,
Mhm.
can really ruin this whole thing? Or do you use different words? And so one of the things I use, and I've tried to tell people this, is when it comes to conflict, you cannot use you statements, especially from a parent's perspective, because if I was saying to you, say you're my child, and I would say, no, you're always doing this and you're always late. You never listen. That kid is you're going to back into in a corner and you're going to shut down emotionally. You're done.
Mhm.
But if I said, you know, Nona, I see that something's going on. Is there something I can help you with? Is there
Mhm,
something I can do?
mhm,
Do you need to talk to me or what? So you're taking that pressure off of them to have the solution for the problem, and you're opening yourself up to that trust factor. I think when there's all that conflict, there's just no trust. And that's when kids shut down and the parents say, yep, they're just regular teenagers, see what they're doing. They throw their hands in the air.
mhm,
When I started this series, it was right after the Georgia shooting.
mhm,
And I didn't really think this through. I just thought I'm going to do this because sometimes you just got to take action and kind of figure it out as you go.
mhm.
Knowing that a parent knows something is wrong and they still opt to continue down that road, what can we do to then say, okay, you know, this is going to be a problem? At this juncture right here, if this were to continue on this trajectory, chances are this could happen. Chances are this is an outcome. We have to get you back on a different trajectory. How then, if a parent knows something's happened, like in Georgia, the son had posted this message on Discord that he wanted to shoot up a school. He told the police and his dad that it was a hacked account. He didn't do it. Of course, then a year later, he goes to school and kills four people. At what point do parents have to then step up and say, okay, I have to take responsibility and listen? Because I always hear the outcome is look what this teenager did, look what this kid did. That's what the media says. That's what the general populace says. And I've always said, well, what happened when he was 5? What happened when he was 6? Like you were saying earlier, what happened at 4 and 5 years old? What happened at 10 years old? What catastrophic event or continuous events have happened in this kid's life to where he has no sense of compassion, empathy, kindness? He's just a shell of himself. What happened to this kid that led him to believe that shooting people was his only sense of power and to be heard and to be seen? We talked about this yesterday. How important is it? How important is it for everyone, regardless of age, to have that sense of personal power to make some choices for themselves, but also be seen and heard? And working with children and teenagers, how often do you have a situation where a kid is just sitting in the room, not looking at you, super quiet, and he or she is a shell of what they could be because of this lack of, they've never been given the opportunity to speak for themselves, advocate for themselves. You know, how much of a problem is that? I don't know. I'm not quite sure how to articulate this right now because I've got a million things in my mind, but how then do you tell a parent you have to give your son, your daughter some personal power? How would you go about that?
Good question. And that brings to mind a little girl that I worked with several years ago. I started working with her when she was 5.
Wow,
And yeah, itty bitty. I called her my itty bitty.
5 years
And
old.
5 years old. And her mother brought her in for services to the agency that I was working with at that time. And when I started working with this little girl, children want to talk, they want to interact, they want that engagement, right?
Hmm.
So I started working with her, we're playing, we're doing all kinds of different things. And what I eventually got to was nobody in her house was listening to her. Nobody was listening when
That's my
she
dog jumped up
said,
here. Come Sorry, she wanted to be heard.
absolutely.
Sorry.
When she said she was hungry, or when she said she was bored, or when she wanted somebody to play with her, whatever the situation was, she wasn't heard. Um, Her mom was a single parent, and she had older brothers and sisters. But the older brothers and sisters don't want to be bothered with the baby sister.
Right.
Mom is at work. The older siblings are left at home to, kind of manage things. And in in frustration, in frustration, she started with very aggressive behaviors. She actually, they had some kind of monitor sitting on the floor, and at the point of having a temper tantrum, she kicked the monitor. She busted the screen out of the monitor. Um, she was throwing things and all of that. One of the things that I when I work with my parents, I try to help them to understand. We talked about this earlier, that behaviors are communication.
Mm-hmm.
This 5-year-old little girl, she didn't have the words, she didn't have the emotional expressions other than her behaviors to
Yeah.
communicate that something was wrong, right? And so that's something that I found from the youngest even up into adulthood. I have worked with adults that have a very limited emotional vocabulary. It's happy, mad, sad, glad,
Yep.
and pissed off. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
outside of those 5 emotional expressions, um, they don't have very much. So when working with them and trying to get them to express whatever those thoughts and feelings are, because it doesn't, what they're feeling, what they're thinking are not a part of that five. Oftentimes it's, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, right?
Yep.
So as you said, communication is very important, but parents also have to understand that behaviors are communication as well. Our society, our communities need to understand that behaviors are communication. So when you have a child that goes to school and shoot up the school and kill people in the school, that child's behaviors is communication, right? Now, at this point, we're, it's a situation where things have been left unheard and unmanaged up to that point.
Yeah.
But parents need to become aware of and cognizant of what their child is communicating behaviorally and non-verbally, right? So again, I think this is about educating the parents, because with this little girl, I went into the home, I worked with mom, helped mom to understand. And as our work continued, and as her and the kids were learning how to hear and attend to this little 5-year-old, with time, things got better. With time, I taught her also how to express, what she was thinking and feeling as well. So use, a number of different tools to help her to learn the different words that she needed to learn to communicate. But I also had to work with the family to get them to understand that they needed to hear her as well. They needed to attend to her. And again, mom is working. When mom is home, she's resting, sleeping, trying to get up to go in for an evening shift of work or whatever. And so she didn't always have the capacity either to hear and attend to her daughter, because again, she's a single parent. She has 4 kids in the home. She's trying to keep a roof over their head. She's doing the very best
Stressed out.
that she
She's very
has.
stressed out.
Yeah.
And that, again, that's something, when I do my workshops, I talk about body language and tone. And, when it comes to communication, the verbal is very, very small in terms of, on a 100-point scale, verbal is very small, what we hear. It's how we hear it, what we see, the arms folded, the hands, the on the phone, disconnected. That speaks volumes. And when you're in a home, or when a child is in a home with challenges, a lot of times those parents are just in survival mode. They're trying to figure out how to pay the bill. Maybe they got a message that day in the mail that, the power bill's late, or the water bill's due, or the car insurance is lapsing. And so they're focusing on dollars and Then you got one saying, I need to go to the prom. Can you buy me some stuff? Or this one's saying, I'm hungry. What's in the refrigerator? So parents really are stretched out 100%. And I think when it comes to these kids that have done the school shooting, if you look at their history, and I've studied all of them up until recently, over the course of the time I wrote my book, I studied everything that was out there that was in the media. Now, I didn't get all the facts because it's only what the media puts out and the families put out, but all of them had a lot of the same warning signs, if you will. They had the issues in the home. They had the social system was in there, whether it was foster care, whether it was CPS, whether it was law enforcement, and or they were going from family member to family member. And one of the things that you and I talked about yesterday was, and I will get technical here, with Dr. Eric Erickson and his trust mistrust, which is in the very early stages of infancy,
Mhm,
up to about 18 months,
mhm,
and attachment issues or detachment issues.
mhm,
So when we look at the psychology of a school shooter, we can't just say, oh, he's 14, he's watching video games, which that might be part of it. But going back as early as how was that child when he or she first came home?
mhm,
What was that early? Uh, was there a lot of attachment to the mother? Was there a lot of, was he left off at a daycare? Was he left off with somebody else? Was he exposed to drugs and alcohol and other things? What happened even that far back? And I don't think most people understand the importance of those first 5 years and why in today's world, when you've got two parents working, what do? They have a child, and they go right to daycare. And so now the parents are working to pay daycare instead of being home with their child because daycare is so darn expensive. It's
mhm,
almost like you're working just to keep them in daycare.
mhm.
We don't know what happens in daycares. We don't know. And I'm not bashing daycares. There's probably some really good ones, but I'm saying that when you drop your son or daughter off all the time, I know that I took my oldest to kindergarten. He would stick his head out the door and watch me walk all the way down the hall. And I had to start going a different direction because the teacher was like, he won't come sit down until he's watching you.
Mhm,
And I felt terrible. He wasn't crying. He was just watching me go, and I said back, type of thing.
mhm,
But a lot of kids don't have that. They literally get dropped off. The mom is talking to the person at the desk or one of the workers, and the kids, then they take them and they're whisked away. The mom's running out the door to get in the car to go to work until 6 o'clock at night. And for a lot of these kids, they just don't have that early connection with their parent. So that lack of trust, I think, is a big issue. Um, what are some things that, let me check our time here. Oh man, we're almost done. My goodness, this has been a great conversation. What are some things that, like, right off the bat, maybe some coping skills or some tools? What could you offer some parents? Just some very basic things like what to look for, how to talk to your kids. What are some things you give some tools right now for them?
You know what, Chris? I'm gonna go back, and I may be dating myself a little bit. Um, but when I was growing up, it was very important that we had our meals together as a family, right?
Very important. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So when you talk about all the things that um parents are doing, to keep a roof over their head and food on the table, all of that, it's not always about quantity, that saying, it's not always quantity, it's quality.
Quality. Yep.
So, I've worked with people where we had to work on the family coming together. We had to work on um, family time being a priority. And oftentimes that's more manageable when it can be time around the table, right? I've worked with families where the screens have to be turned off, they have to be put away, and we're going to spend time as a family. And again, oftentimes it's more manageable, it's easier if we can do it around dinner,
Right.
in the summer, if we can do it around lunch, and spending that time with the kids. Another thing that I have my parents doing is at the end of the day, you know, designate a certain amount of time before the child goes to bed that you're going to come together and spend time together and have those conversations. So when you talk about trust, again, parents are struggling, in many different ways with the parent that I was working with my itty bitty, right? I said, there was a period of time where she got home, the little girl got home, and there was maybe an hour before mom left going to work. And
Wow.
so we worked and we carved out, 20 minutes, 30 minutes for you to sit down and let her tell you about her day, let her tell you about, the good things that happened and the challenging things that happened. And you talk to her about, what the evening is going to be like, bring the other kids, get the older kids involved, and you sit down and you lay out those expectations and, things like that.
Hmm.
So parents don't have a whole lot of time. So it's really not about having big chunks of time, but, where you can get those small chunks of time, be present and connect. Even those small chunks of time will be helpful if you are connecting with your child to find out how things are going in school and things like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Asking those, go ahead, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I'm agreeing with you. It's just I remember when again I'm dating myself too. We had to have dinner every night, no later than 5:30, maybe
Mhm,
5,
mhm,
and we would sit at the table. We'd help clear the dishes. We'd help do everything.
mhm,
Sometimes if my mom had the meal already made, we'd still put together salads or make coffee or
mhm,
something like that.
mhm.
And we would talk about our day. We would talk about events that were coming up, whether it was school events or sporting events or just things
Absolutely.
that we were going to do.
Mhm,
Having that family connection was so important. And I know we hear about this a lot in today's world that it doesn't matter, you can do this and do that. But I really do feel like, and the older I get, and looking back with my two boys, it was those moments around the table that we talked about school, or we talked about what their friends said, or what they saw, or what happened on the bus, and it really allowed us to connect to them at their level for their day. It
mhm.
wasn't just they were our children. We were connecting with them at their level. So meeting them where they are.
Absolutely.
And
Mhm,
I'll never forget, I'm gonna wrap this up real quick. So my second child, Keegan, was in third grade. He was 9 years old and he was just having a really hard time, just a hard time. And I took him out in the backyard and I picked him up and I hugged him. I said, Keeg, what's wrong? What's happening?
mhm,
And he didn't want to tell me at first because he was trying to be tough. He's 9, and didn't want to cry because these bigger girls, fifth grade girls, were picking on him relentlessly, like really picking on him on the bus,
mhm,
really, really just getting him. And
mhm,
he was too small to defend himself. And no one would really stand up for him. And so it had just gotten to him to the point where he was just having this horrible breakdown. I asked him when he got out of boot camp for the Marine Corps, what he remembers most in his childhood. And he said, "There's a lot of things, Dad, of course, but he goes, there was one thing that really stands out to me." I was like, "Really?" I said, "What's that?" I was thinking like a trip or, something, some gift or something.
mhm,
He said, when I was 9 years old, you took me out in the backyard and you picked me up and I was having a horrible time. He told the story from his side, his perspective.
mhm,
And I almost started crying. It was just like, oh my gosh, you remembered that? Like I remember it now that he mentions it, but
mhm,
that had escaped me the 5 minutes after it happened. But
mhm,
for him, it was so impactful
mhm,
that now at 20 years old, that's one of the biggest memories he has is when he was in a really down place.
mhm,
I was there for him.
mhm,
And I think, you know, I'm sure a lot of parents are, but I think for a lot of kids today, especially the ones that we're specifically talking about,
mhm,
I don't think they've ever had that.
mhm,
If we listen to the court cases and we look at the history that they've gone through and the just the levels of um, destructiveness within their life at such a young age, I don't think anybody would pick them up and said it'll be okay.
Mhm.
And man, it's gonna make me upset. Um, this is what I want with this show. I want people to understand that yes, what these kids have done is absolutely horrific, and I'm by no means, at all supporting that.
Absolutely.
But I think we're doing society and these kids an injustice, how do I say that, by
Enjoy.
not looking deeper, not going to the root of what's happening, not looking at the family dynamic, the brain development dynamic, the
Mhm.
societal changes, the technology changes that they deal with.
Mhm.
All of these things, in my view,
Mhm.
play, it's like a big toxic soup. You throw everything in and hope that it comes out, but it's going to come out tasting horrible because there's no positive energy in there. There's no love in that. There's no connection in that. And when it has to come from school teachers and therapists and podcast guys like me, and that doesn't have the same meaning than when it comes from the mom, the dad, or maybe the grandparent, depending who they're with, but that key adult in their life. And I think that's what all these kids, if you look at every one of them, they were missing that piece. There was more to it than what we heard. And I think as a society, if we can start looking at our kindergartners,
Mhm.
looking at our third graders, looking at our elementary school kids, and looking at our new parents, when you have a child today and you leave a hospital, you leave with a social security card for that child
Mhm.
and maybe a gift pack from the hospital, but there's nothing in there saying, hey, you're going to have a lot of challenges with this little guy or little girl. You're
Mhm.
going to have a lot of changes in society, your own life,
Mhm.
your own family dynamic. Here's some resources. Here's some things you can do to prepare yourself.
Mhm.
I do some of that in my book, but again, it is what it is. But I think if parents were given those resources and support system as they're taking that child home, they got to take them home in a car seat. That's a
Mhm.
mandated thing. They have to have a social security card. That's a mandated thing.
Mhm.
They have to make their first, doctor visit. That's a mandated thing.
Mhm.
Why not say, here's some instructions, just some basic psychology, some basic behavior, some basic things you can do to ensure that you're doing the best you can do
Mhm.
and you're giving this child the best opportunity to thrive and be successful.
That's
Um, again, these are just ideas. I'm trying to come up with things that we can maybe, put into play and present. I don't know what all to do with that, but maybe that's something we could do. I like the Georgia thing. I know that we have our stuff here in Florida. Um, but we got a lot of work to do and we have
yeah,
more
we
weeks
do.
of this to talk about things. So, but
Yeah.
we're going to wrap this one up. It is 6:01. I told you 1 hour and I'm going to stick to it. Do you have anything you would like to share before we go?
Um, just recognizing again, I can't say this too loudly, that um many parents are doing the best that they can. I think one of the most important things that we can do is to try to connect them to resources that can be assistant. Oftentimes you mention about the boy's father who knew that something was
Georgia,
going
yeah.
on. Oftentimes parents know, they may suspect, but they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to go, right? And so I think as far as mental health is concerned, I think we need to get that more into our schools.
Hmm.
Um, I agree with your idea about parent training. At these pivotal moments in kindergartens and parent training, third grade, fifth grade, we're going to be parenting a 15-year-old very differently than we do a 5-year-old. But
Yes.
a lot of parents don't know that how they relate and how their interaction, it needs to shift and it needs to be different, just as that child is different, right? But I think
Yes.
the biggest thing of what we're talking about is what you said earlier, families making those intentional connections with each other, parents making those connections with their children, know what's going on in your children's lives, be observant for not only what is said, but what's not said, what the body language may
Body
be
language is huge. Yes.
communicating, all of that. There are a lot of ways for parents to gather information, but
My dog should
they
jump.
also need to know that there is help and assistance. There
Okay.
she goes
Yes.
again. Yeah,
Yeah, I know. She jumped down. I was trying to like keep her out of the way. I'm so sorry. She's a very spoiled dog.
that's,
Yes,
yeah,
you are.
she's
Okay.
daddy's girl.
Okay. We have dinner together. It's fine. So
Mhm.
that's good. All right. Well, Nona, I'm gonna wrap this one up. Thank you so much. I will definitely have you back on as we continue to discuss these different things. We'll get into different areas. I know today was like warning signs, things to look for.
Mhm.
I definitely want to come up with some deeper things that we can help parents with, and maybe we can do a whole show with support services and just kind of go through that,
Yeah,
and what that's all about, and
yeah,
what a therapy session looks like.
yeah,
Because as we talked about yesterday, one of the things that I would like to break is the stigma of mental health therapy and just understanding what that's all about, so that guys my age or younger don't feel like they're doing something wrong or whatever the case may be.
mhm,
So I do think that I know we didn't touch on it today, but the stigma of getting help and asking for help needs to change.
absolutely,
And I think that's
absolutely.
something that we can all agree on,
Mhm,
that we all have to agree that we are all in this together. And
mhm,
if someone's hurting, we should all feel like we're hurting. We're seeing it now
absolutely,
with the hurricane cleanup. People that weren't affected are going up and doing things because we all have the same humanitarian heart. And I believe
absolutely,
that that's something that we have to really stress when it comes to mental illness, and especially the development of our children that are the
absolutely.
greatest asset to this nation.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. I appreciate your time and your insights. I really, really do. I'm so glad I met you a few weeks ago up in Atlanta at the Empower Success Fest.
Yes,
And we're going to be doing that again next year, next September. So I'll be in touch. I'll let you know when this is all good to go. And do you want to let anybody know how to reach you in Atlanta?
yes, well, currently, I'm an associate in a private practice, Allen Bierman and Associates, so they can Google us. And, if they go to the website, they will see my name out there with the list of, other therapists that,
Okay. Fantastic.
we work with. Yes,
Fantastic. You guys have a great day up here in Atlanta. I know it's probably a little bit nicer here in Florida, but fall's coming. I know Atlanta. I miss Atlanta. Fall is beautiful in the fall time. All
yeah,
right. You have a great night. I'll talk to you very, very soon.
you too.
All right.
Uh,
Bye.
Take care, Chris. Bye-bye.
Everybody.